The dust hadn't settled yet when Elara Vaughn heard the first crack. She was standing near the central atrium of Horizon Galleria, reviewing the lighting installation on her tablet. The mall had opened 6 months ago, and she'd been called in to consult on some minor adjustments to the original design. Around her, Saturday afternoon shoppers drifted between storefronts, their voices echoing off the glass and steel she'd spent 3 years perfecting. The crack came from above. A sound like ice breaking across a frozen lake, but deeper. Elara looked up. The suspended walkway on the 3rd level had shifted, just slightly, just enough that the safety railing no longer aligned with its mounting brackets. She was already moving toward the emergency exit when the second crack split the air. This one was accompanied by screams. The walkway buckled, and then gravity took over. Steel beams twisted. Glass shattered into 1,000 falling stars. The suspended section came down in a cascading collapse that pulled the supporting columns with it. Elara ran, not away from the destruction, but toward the emergency stairwell she'd specified in the original plans. The one that was supposed to remain structurally independent. She made it 3 steps before the floor beneath her gave way. She fell through darkness and debris, her body slamming against concrete and rebar. When she stopped falling, she was pinned beneath a section of the collapsed walkway. Her left leg trapped at an angle that sent white-hot pain up her spine. Blood ran into her eyes. She could taste dust and copper. Through the settling debris, she could see others. A young woman was trapped 15 feet away, her lower body crushed beneath a concrete pillar. She was screaming. Beyond her, an elderly man lay motionless. Further still, she could hear children crying. Elara tried to move. The beam across her leg shifted, and the pain became unbearable. She stopped, breathing hard, trying to think through the shock. Her phone was somewhere in the rubble. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder. Then she heard a voice she knew. Elara! Nathan was somewhere above her, his voice cutting through the chaos. Relief flooded through her, sudden and overwhelming. He was here. He was a trauma surgeon. He would know what to do. Nathan, I'm here. I'm trapped. She could hear him moving through the debris, the sound of rubble shifting. Then his voice again, closer now but not moving toward her. Mara! Oh God, Mara, can you hear me? Elara's relief crystallized into something else, something colder. Mara Cross, Nathan's colleague from the hospital. The young resident he'd been mentoring for the past 8 months. The one he'd mentioned so often at dinner that Elara had stopped asking about his day. Nathan, Elara called again. I'm over here. My leg is trapped. She could see him now, or at least his silhouette through the haze of dust. He was crouched beside the young woman with the crushed lower body. Mara. He was checking her pulse, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Elara, I know. Just hold on. But he wasn't moving toward her. He was assessing Mara's injuries, his focus absolute. Elara watched as Nathan looked between them. She could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The triage assessment. Who was worse off? Who needed immediate intervention? She wanted to call out again, to demand his attention, to remind him that she was his wife. But the words stuck in her throat, held back by 4 years of learning not to ask for what he couldn't give. Nathan made his choice. He lifted Mara carefully, supporting her crushed lower body as he carried her toward the emergency responders who were just arriving. She was unconscious now, her head lolling against his shoulder. He moved with the kind of focused determination Elara had always admired about him. The way he became utterly committed to saving whoever was in front of him, even when that meant leaving his wife pinned beneath rubble. If you think you know how this story ends, you're wrong. Hit subscribe and keep watching because the choice Nathan just made will destroy everything. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Elara stopped calling for him. She lay still, watching her husband carry another woman to safety while the beam across her leg grew heavier. The pain was becoming distant now, shock setting in like a cold blanket. She counted her breaths, focused on staying conscious. The emergency responders found her 4 minutes later. By then, Nathan was already in the ambulance with Mara, holding pressure on her wounds. Elara saw them pull away as the firefighters worked to free her leg, the siren growing fainter until it disappeared entirely. They extracted her carefully. The beam had fractured her femur in 2 places, but she'd been lucky. No arterial damage, no spinal injury, just pain and the knowledge that when it had mattered most, her husband had chosen someone else. At the hospital, they set her leg and gave her something for the pain. The medications made everything soft and distant, but they couldn't touch the clarity that had settled over her thoughts. She lay in the recovery room, staring at the ceiling tiles, and let herself acknowledge what she'd been avoiding for months. Nathan had been pulling away for over a year, working longer hours, taking extra shifts, mentoring Mara with an intensity he'd never shown for his other residents, coming home late and distracted, his mind still at the hospital even when his body was beside her in bed. Elara had told herself it was just his dedication to his work, that she was being paranoid, that 4 years of marriage meant something. But she'd seen his face in that moment of choice. The way he'd looked at Mara, the way he hadn't looked at her. A nurse came in to check her vitals. She asked if Elara wanted to call anyone. Elara shook her head. Her father was in Singapore on business, and she hadn't spoken to him in 3 months anyway. Her mother had died when she was 16. She had colleagues but not friends. Not really. She'd let those relationships atrophy during the 4 years of trying to be enough for Nathan. "Your husband is in surgery," the nurse said gently. "Dr. Hale. He's working on the young woman from the collapse. We'll let him know you're here when he's finished." Lara nodded. Of course he was in surgery. Of course he was saving Mara. That was who Nathan was. The hero. The dedicated surgeon who never gave up on a patient. She just hadn't realized she'd become someone he could give up on so easily. The news reports started coming in that evening. Horizon Galleria collapse. 12 dead. 47 injured. Structural failure in the suspended walkway system. Investigations pending. The images showed the twisted metal and shattered glass, the gaping hole where the third-floor atrium had been. Elara studied the footage with a professional detachment that surprised her. She could see exactly where the failure had occurred. The support columns had given way first, which meant the load distribution system had been compromised. But her design had included redundancies. Triple redundancies. The walkway should have been able to support 5 times the maximum occupancy load. Something had been changed, modified after her final approval. She was still watching the news when Nathan finally appeared in her doorway. It was nearly midnight. He looked exhausted, his scrubs spattered with blood, his face drawn. He stood there for a moment just looking at her, and she could see the guilt in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had to. I know." He moved into the room, pulling a chair close to her bed. Mara's injuries were catastrophic. Both kidneys were crushed. "If I hadn't gotten her out when I did." "You made the right call," Elara said. Her voice was steady. "Clinical. Triage. Worst injury first." Nathan looked at her, searching her face for something. Anger maybe. Or hurt. But Elara kept her expression neutral, the same way she did when presenting designs to difficult clients. "Your leg. Fractured femur." They said it. "I'll need physical therapy, but full recovery is expected." He nodded, reached for her hand. She let him take it but didn't squeeze back. "I should have," he started then stopped. They both knew there was no good way to finish that sentence. They sat in silence. Outside, the city continued its investigation into the collapse. Inside, the monitors beeped steadily, marking time. "Mara's going to need dialysis," Nathan said finally. "Both kidneys are non-functional. They're putting her on the transplant list, but..." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Elara knew meant he was trying to solve an impossible problem. "The wait times are years. And with her blood type, finding a match will be difficult." Elara said nothing. She watched her husband process the implications, saw the moment the idea occurred to him. "I'm going to get tested," he said, "to see if I'm a match." "You don't have to do that. She doesn't have anyone else. She's been in the foster system since she was 8. No family. No one to." He looked at Elara, and she could see him asking for understanding, for approval. "I can't just let her die waiting for a kidney that might never come." "No," Elara said quietly. "You can't. 'Cause that was who Nathan was. The man who saved people. The man who couldn't walk away from someone in need. The man who would give away pieces of himself to strangers while his wife learned to live with whatever was left over." He stayed with her for another hour, mostly in silence. When he finally left to check on Mara, Elara turned off the television and closed her eyes. But she didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, feeling the weight of her casted leg and the heavier weight of certainty settling over her. 4 years ago, she'd married Nathan Hale believing that love was enough. That if she was patient and understanding and didn't ask for too much, he would eventually have room for her in the crowded space of his conscience. Tonight, pinned beneath rubble and watching her husband carry another woman to safety, she'd finally understood. There would always be someone more urgent. Someone whose need was more immediate. Someone whose crisis trumped her quiet existence. She had never been his priority. She had been his respite. The calm between emergencies. The place he returned to when there was no one else who needed saving. The distinction mattered. The next morning, Elara's father called. Richard Vaughn's voice was crisp and businesslike, the way it always was. "I saw the news. Are you injured?" "Fractured femur." "I'll be fine." "Good. I'm cutting the Singapore trip short. I'll be back in the city by tomorrow evening." The preliminary investigation is pointing to structural failure. "Your design." "My design was sound. Someone altered it after final approval." "Can you prove that?" Elara thought about the documentation she'd kept. The signed approval forms. The specification sheets with her original calculations. "Yes. Then we'll need to get ahead of this. The media will try to make you the scapegoat." "I know." Another pause. Longer this time. "How's Nathan?" "He's Nathan. Saving someone." Her father made a sound that might have been approval or understanding or just acknowledgement. With Richard Vaughn it was always hard to tell. "I'll have my assistant book you a suite at the Peninsula. Better recovery environment than a hospital room." "I'm fine here." "Elara." His voice sharpened slightly. "You're injured, your husband is distracted, and someone is going to try to blame you for 12 deaths. Let me handle the logistics while you focus on recovery and documentation." She wanted to argue, to insist on her independence. But the pain medication was wearing off and her leg was throbbing, and she was tired of being the person who never asked for help. "Okay. Good. I'll have everything arranged by this afternoon." He hung up without saying goodbye. That was his way. Efficient. Transactional. But he was coming back early from a business trip, which was probably the closest Richard Vaughn came to expressing concern. Nathan returned mid-morning with coffee and an update. Mara had survived the night. The dialysis was keeping her stable. He'd been tested for compatibility, and the results would be back in 48 hours. "The surgeons are optimistic about your recovery timeline," he said, settling into the chair beside her bed. 6 to 8 weeks before you're walking without assistance. Physical therapy should." "I'm moving to the Peninsula this afternoon," Elara interrupted. "My father arranged it." Nathan blinked. "That's not necessary. I can. You're needed here. Mara needs. You're my wife." The words hung between them. Elara met his eyes and saw the guilt there, the awareness of his earlier choice. She could see him trying to balance it all. His duty to his patient. His obligation to his wife. His need to be the hero in every story. She decided to make it easier for him. She was good at that. Making things easier. "Mara needs you more right now. I'll be fine at the hotel. Better actually. Quieter. I can work on the collapse investigation from there. Relief and guilt warred across his features. I'll come by every evening. Once Mara's stable. Nathan. She kept her voice gentle. Understanding. It's okay. Really? He reached for her hand again. This time she squeezed back just a little. Just enough to release him from the guilt that was already eating at him. He left an hour later, called back to the ICU for Mara's morning assessment. Elara watched him go, then reached for her phone. She had calls to make, documentation to retrieve, a defense to build. And somewhere beneath all of that, a decision to make about what came next. The compatibility results came back 2 days later. Elara was at the peninsula by then, her leg elevated on pillows, her laptop open to architectural specifications and structural engineering reports. Her father had visited once, staying for exactly 30 minutes to review her documentation and make several calls to his legal team. Nathan arrived at 7 that evening, still in his scrubs. He stood in the doorway of her suite, and she knew immediately. You're a match. He nodded. Perfect match, actually. Same blood type, tissue compatibility is excellent. The transplant coordinator says it's rare to see numbers this good from an unrelated donor. Elara saved her work and closed the laptop. When? They want to do it as soon as possible. Her kidney function is declining faster than expected. The dialysis is keeping her alive, but... He moved into the room, sat on the edge of the sofa across from her. They're recommending surgery within the next 2 weeks. And you've agreed. I told them I needed to discuss it with you first. It was the right thing to say. The considerate thing. But they both knew the decision had already been made. Nathan had decided the moment he'd carried Mara out of that rubble. Everything since then had just been logistics. What are the risks? Elara asked. For me. Standard surgical risks. Infection, bleeding, anesthesia complications. Long-term, living with one kidney means I'd need to be more careful about hydration, avoid certain medications. I'd probably need to give up contact sports, but... He smiled slightly. I don't play any anyway. Career risks. The smile faded. The hospital isn't thrilled about it. A surgeon with reduced kidney function is a liability concern. They can't force me not to do it, but there's been some discussion about whether I'd be able to maintain my current surgical schedule afterward. They could limit your time. Possibly. Probably. He looked at his hands. But Mara doesn't have 2 weeks to wait for me to negotiate with hospital administration. She might not have 2 weeks at all. Elara studied her husband. The man she'd married 4 years ago at a simple courthouse ceremony because neither of them had wanted the fuss of a big wedding. He looked older now, more tired. But that same intensity was there. That same driving need to fix, to save, to sacrifice himself for others. She'd fallen in love with that intensity once. The way he gave everything to his patients. The way he never gave up. She'd thought there would be some of that devotion left over for her. That she'd earned a place in his hierarchy of care. But she'd been wrong. She was the respite, not the mission. The calm between storms. And storms, she was learning, were all Nathan really knew how to navigate. You should do it, she said. He looked up, searching her face. You're sure? Mara needs a kidney. You can give her one. The math is simple. Elara. I mean it, Nathan. You should do it. She kept her voice steady. Supportive. It's who you are. The person who helps. I wouldn't want you to be anyone else. The relief in his eyes was immediate and profound. He stood, crossed to her chair, knelt beside it so they were eye level. Thank you. I know this isn't easy. I know I'm asking a lot. You're not asking, she said quietly. You're telling me what you've already decided. There's a difference. He flinched. But he didn't argue. Because they both knew it was true. He stayed for another hour. They talked about the surgery schedule, the recovery timeline, the arrangements that would need to be made. Nathan would need 6 weeks of reduced duty after the transplant. Mara would need even longer. They'd both be out of work, recovering simultaneously. "I'll need to stay at the hospital during recovery," Nathan said. "It'll be easier for the follow-up care. But once I'm cleared to leave, we'll figure it out," Elara said. After he left, she sat in the darkening suite and stared out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mara Cross was lying in a hospital bed, waiting for Nathan's kidney. Waiting for Nathan's sacrifice. Waiting for Nathan. Elara picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, found her father's number. The call connected on the second ring. "I need to know something," she said. "The Aurelia Group. Are you still looking for someone to head the architectural division?" Her father was silent for a moment. "You've never wanted anything to do with the family business. I'm asking now. Why?" Elara looked down at her casted leg. At the evidence of Nathan's choice. "Because I'm tired of being the person who waits while everyone else decides what happens next." Another pause. Then, "The position is yours if you want it. But you'll need to prove yourself. No special treatment because you're my daughter." "I wouldn't want special treatment." "Good. Because you won't get it." She could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "When can you start?" "After the transplant. After Nathan's recovered. That's 2 months away. I have some things to finish first." Her father didn't ask what things. He never asked questions he didn't need the answers to. "Fine. I'll have the contracts drawn up. Welcome to Aurelia, Elara." He hung up. Elara set the phone aside and returned her attention to her laptop. The investigation reports. The structural specifications. The evidence that someone had altered her design and killed 12 people in the process. She had 2 months to build her case. 2 months to document everything. 2 months to prepare for the life that came after Nathan gave away a kidney to save someone else. 2 months to stop being the woman who waited. The surgery was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Nathan spent the week before running through every possible complication with his surgical team, preparing Mara psychologically, and arranging his own medical leave. He visited Elara every evening, but the visits grew shorter as the date approached. His mind was already in the ore, already focused on the procedure that would save Mara's life at the cost of his own physical completeness. Elara watched it happen with a detachment that might have worried her if she'd had the energy to care. She felt like she was observing their marriage from outside herself, watching 2 people go through the motions of partnership while the actual connection between them frayed thread by thread. The night before the surgery, Nathan stayed late. They ordered room service and ate mostly in silence, the unspoken weight of tomorrow pressing down on both of them. "Are you scared?" Elara asked finally. "No." He set down his fork. "Maybe. Little. But it's the right thing to do." "The right thing," she echoed. "Does that make it easier?" He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. "What do you want me to say, Elara? That I wish I'd let her die? That I should have left her in that rubble? I want you to say that it matters. That I matter. That leaving me trapped while you saved her meant something." The words were out before she could stop them. Unfiltered. Everything she'd been holding back for 4 years distilled into 2 sentences. Nathan went very still. "You matter. Of course you matter." "Do I?" She kept her voice level. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I matter when it's convenient. When there's no one else who needs you more. That's not fair." "No," she agreed. "It's probably not. But it's how I feel." They stared at each other across the room service cart. 2 people who'd promised forever without really understanding what forever meant. Without acknowledging that sometimes love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between who you were and who someone needed you to be. "I don't know how to be what you need," Nathan said finally. "I don't know how to turn off the part of me that has to help, that has to save people. I'm not asking you to turn it off. I'm asking you to make room for me somewhere in all that saving." "I thought I had." Elara smiled, sad and small. "So did I." Nathan left shortly after that. Kissed her forehead. Told her he'd call after the surgery. walked out of the suite without looking back. Elara sat in the silence he left behind and felt something inside her chest finally break cleanly. 4 years of hoping. 4 years of waiting. 4 years of being the calm between storms. She was done waiting. The next morning, she called her father's attorney. By noon, she had an appointment scheduled for the following week. By evening, while Nathan was in surgery donating a kidney to a woman he barely knew, Elara had made a list of everything she needed to do. File for divorce. Join Aurelia Group. Find out who had altered her designs and destroyed Horizon Galleria. Build a life that didn't revolve around being enough for someone who would never have room for her. The surgery was a success. Nathan and Mara both came through without complications. The kidney began functioning immediately. Within 48 hours, Mara's numbers were improving. Within a week, she was being called a miracle. Nathan was being called a hero. The media loved the story. Brilliant surgeon risks his career to save his mentee. Selfless act of compassion. Human interest angle. They interviewed Nathan's colleagues, Mara's former foster families, the transplant coordinator. Everyone agreed. Dr. Nathan Hale was exactly the kind of person the world needed more of. No one interviewed Elara. No one asked the wife what she thought about her husband giving away a kidney. About the choice he'd made in that rubble. About the marriage that was quietly ending while the world celebrated his sacrifice. She was fine with that. She had work to do. The structural investigation into Horizon Galleria was moving forward. Elara had handed over her original designs, her signed approvals. Every piece of documentation that proved her specifications had been sound. The investigative team was now looking into who had made the modifications, who had reduced the support column specifications, who had signed off on changes that violated every safety protocol. His name was Lucas Reed, project manager. He'd been responsible for the final construction phase after Elara's design approval. And according to the documentation trail Elara's father's legal team had uncovered, Lucas had approved cost-saving modifications that reduced the structural integrity by 30%. 12 people had died because Lucas Reed wanted to come in under budget. Elara was going to make sure everyone knew it. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks after Nathan's surgery. Elara did it quietly, through her father's attorney, with a settlement offer that was more than generous. She wanted nothing from Nathan except her freedom. No alimony. No division of assets, just a clean break and the right to move forward. Nathan received the papers while he was still on medical leave. He came to the peninsula that evening, the envelope in his hand, confusion and hurt written across his face. What is this? Elara was at her laptop, working through the final details of the Horizon investigation. She didn't look up. What it says it is. You're divorcing me. Now. While I'm recovering from surgery. The timing isn't ideal, she acknowledged. But there's never a good time for this conversation. Elara. He moved into the room, sat down heavily on the sofa. I know the last month has been hard. I know I haven't been here the way you needed. But this. He gestured with the envelope. This is extreme. Is it? She finally looked at him. You gave away a kidney to save someone you've known for 8 months. You're recovering in a hospital room 3 floors away from her. You call me once a day to tell me you're fine, but you visit her 4 times a day to check on the transplant. Tell me, Nathan, what part of that suggests we have a marriage worth saving? That's not, he stopped. Started again. Mara needed support. She doesn't have anyone else. And I have you. The question hung in the air. Nathan opened his mouth, closed it. They both knew the answer. I love you, he said finally. I know you do. In your way. When you have time. When no one else needs you more. Elara saved her work and closed the laptop. But I'm tired of being an afterthought, Nathan. I'm tired of being the person you come home to when there's no one left to save. I'm tired of making myself smaller so you have room for all your heroes' complexes. That's not what you do. It's exactly what I do. What I've been doing for 4 years. And I'm done. Nathan sat there, The divorce papers crumpled in his hand, and Elara could see him trying to find an argument, a reason she was wrong, a way to fix this like he fixed everything else. But some things couldn't be fixed. Some things were just over. "The settlement is generous," she said, gentler now. "You should have your attorney review it, but I think you'll find everything is fair. We can do this quickly, quietly. No drama. No media attention. I don't want your money, Elara. It's not about money. It's about ending this cleanly. With dignity." She met his eyes. "We both deserve that much." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, the fight draining out of him. "If this is what you want." "It is." He stood, walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, I never meant to hurt you." "I know," Elara said. "That's what makes it so much worse." After he left, she returned to her laptop and opened a new file. Started drafting the press statement that would announce her joining Aurelia Group. Her father wanted to make it a big reveal, but Elara preferred subtlety. Let the work speak for itself. Let her designs prove her worth. She was done being invisible. She was done being the calm between storms. She was done being the woman Nathan Hale came home to when he had nothing left to give. Outside, the city continued its investigation into Horizon Galleria. And inside, Elara Vaughn began planning the next chapter of her life, one where she was no longer defined by the man who'd chosen to save everyone except his wife. The news broke on a Monday morning. Elara was in her father's office on the 42nd floor of the Aurelia Group headquarters when the first article appeared. Richard Vaughn's assistant had escorted her up at 8 sharp, and her father had spent the last 30 minutes reviewing the contracts that would make her head of the architectural division. "The board meeting is scheduled for 10, Richard said, sliding the final page across his desk. "They'll want to see your portfolio, your credentials, proof that this isn't nepotism." "I have everything prepared." Elara's leg was still in a walking cast, but she'd refused the crutches that morning. She could manage the limp. She'd managed worse. Her father studied her with the same analytical gaze he used for building proposals. "The divorce will be public soon. Are you prepared for the questions?" "There won't be questions. Nathan and I are handling it quietly." Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression. "You should see this." He turned his laptop toward her. The headline was from a prominent local news site. "Hero surgeon's wife files for divorce during recovery. Questions raised about timing and motive." Elara felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd been careful. The filing had been sealed. The settlement private. No press releases. No statements. Someone had leaked it. She skimmed the article. It was careful not to make direct accusations, but the implications were clear. Nathan Hale, beloved surgeon, had risked his career and health to save his young mentee. His wife, wealthy architect Elara Vaughn, had filed for divorce while he was still recovering. Sources close to the situation suggested marital tensions had existed before the collapse. Questions were being raised about whether Mrs. Hale had pressured her husband not to donate, whether she'd resented the attention Mara Cross had received, whether she was perhaps jealous. "This is character assassination," Elara said quietly. "This is the beginning," her father corrected. "By tomorrow, every outlet will have picked it up. They'll want your statement, your side of the story. I don't owe them an explanation." "No. But silence will be interpreted as guilt." Richard closed the laptop. "You need to decide how you want to handle this. Before it controls you." Elara's phone began buzzing. Text messages, voicemails. Her personal email was flooding with interview requests. She turned the phone face down on the desk and took a breath. "I join Aurelia as planned. I make no statement about the divorce. I let my work speak for itself. The press will crucify you. Let them." She met her father's eyes. "I'm not interested in winning a popularity contest. I'm interested in building a career that doesn't depend on anyone's approval but my own." Richard studied her for another moment, then nodded. The board meeting is in 90 minutes. I suggest you prepare for hostile questions. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as expected. 12 senior executives sat around the conference table, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Elara presented her portfolio, 10 years of architectural work, including 3 award-winning commercial buildings and the original Horizon Galleria design, and answered their questions with clinical precision. Ms. Vaughn, one of the older board members said, given the current public attention on your personal life, are you certain this is the right time to take on such a visible role? My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities. The perception does matter, however. Aurelia Group's reputation will be enhanced by hiring the architect who designed one of the most innovative commercial structures in the city, Elara interrupted smoothly. The fact that someone else compromised my design and caused its collapse is precisely why you need someone with my attention to detail overseeing your architectural division. Another board member leaned forward. Are you suggesting the Horizon investigation will exonerate you? I'm stating a fact. My original specifications included triple redundancies in the support system. Someone altered those specifications after final approval. The investigation will prove that. And if it doesn't, Elara smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. Then you'll have my resignation on your desk within 24 hours. But it will. Because I don't make mistakes when 12 lives are at stake. The room went quiet. Richard sat at the head of the table, his expression neutral, but Elara caught the slight nod. Approval. Or at least acknowledgement that she was handling herself well. The vote was close. 7-5 in her favor. She started the following Monday. By then, the media storm had intensified. Nathan had been cornered by reporters outside the hospital and had made the mistake of looking hurt and confused when asked about the divorce. The footage played on loop. Dr. Nathan Hale, hero surgeon, betrayed by his wealthy wife during his most vulnerable moment. Elara watched the coverage once, then turned off her television. She had work to do. Her first day at Aurelia, she arrived at 7 and stayed until 10. Her new office was smaller than her father's but had a better view. She could see 3 of her completed buildings from the east window. She spent the morning reviewing active projects and the afternoon meeting her new team. 15 architects, 3 structural engineers, 2 project managers. They were wary of her. Suspicious. She was Richard Vaughn's daughter, which meant she'd been handed a position that should have been earned. She'd expected that. She planned to prove them wrong. By the end of her first week, she'd identified inefficiencies in 4 ongoing projects and had presented solutions that would save the company $6 million. By the end of her second week, she'd landed a contract for a sustainable housing development that 3 other firms had failed to secure. By the end of her third week, the Horizon Galleria investigation released its preliminary findings. Lucas Reed had modified the structural specifications without proper approval. He'd reduced the support column load capacity by 32% to save costs. He'd falsified inspection reports. He'd signed off on materials that didn't meet the design requirements. Elara Vaughn's original design was sound. The collapse was caused by unauthorized modifications made after her final approval. The news should have exonerated her completely. Instead, it sparked a new wave of questions. If she'd designed such a safe structure, why hadn't she been monitoring the construction more closely? Why hadn't she caught the modifications? Where was her oversight? The implication was clear. Even if she wasn't directly responsible, she should have known. Should have prevented it. Should have been there. Elara read the articles with a growing sense of exhaustion. There was no winning this. She could prove her innocence 1,000 times, and there would always be someone suggesting she should have done more. She was in her office, reviewing the investigation report for the 5th time, when her assistant knocked. Ms. Vaughn, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. I'm not taking unscheduled meetings. She says her name is Mara Cross. Elara looked up slowly. Set down the report. Send her in. Mara entered the office with the careful movements of someone still recovering from major surgery. She was younger than Elara had realized. 26, maybe 27. Pretty in a fragile way, with dark hair and eyes that seemed too large for her face. She wore a simple dress and carried herself with a kind of hesitant determination that suggested she'd rehearsed this conversation multiple times. "Ms. Vaughn. Thank you for seeing me." Elara gestured to the chair across from her desk. "You have 5 minutes." Mara sat, folding her hands in her lap. "I wanted to thank you for not standing in the way of the transplant. I know it must have been difficult. You came here to thank me for letting my husband give you his kidney?" "Ah, yes. I know how it sounds, but it sounds like you don't understand what you're asking me to accept." Elara kept her voice level. "Professional. But that's not why you're really here, is it?" Mara flinched. "I wanted you to know that Nathan and we're not." "Not what?" "Not involved. Not emotionally entangled. Not spending 4 hours a day together during recovery while he calls me once a week to say he's fine. It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Ms. Cross?" Mara's hands twisted together. "He saved my life. I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to be around him without feeling like I owe him everything. And she stopped, started again. He treats me like I'm fragile. Like I might break if he's not there to hold me together. That's what Nathan does. He saves people. He holds them together. And when they're stable, he moves on to the next person who needs saving. But I don't want to be saved anymore." Mara looked up and there were tears in her eyes. "I want to be whole. My own. Without owing anyone. Without being the reason your marriage ended." Elara studied the younger woman. Saw the guilt there. The confusion. The desperate need to be absolved of responsibility for something she'd never asked for. "My marriage ended because it was never really whole to begin with," Elara said quietly. "You were just the catalyst. The proof of something I'd been ignoring for years. That doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." Elara glanced at the clock. "Your 5 minutes are up, Ms. Cross." Mara stood, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry. For all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I believe you." Elara returned her attention to the investigation report. "But I'd suggest you figure out who you are without Nathan's attention, before you get used to needing it." After Mara left, Elara sat in silence for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called her father's head of security. "I need you to look into someone. Lucas Reed. Former project manager on the Horizon Galleria project. I want to know everything. His finances, his professional history, who he's been communicating with. Everything. Looking for something specific. I'm looking for why someone would risk 12 lives to save a few $1,000,000. And who might have pushed him to do it." The security report came back 3 days later. Lucas Reed had been desperate. Buried in gambling debt. His wife had left him 6 months before the collapse, taking their daughter and half his savings. He'd been on the verge of bankruptcy when he'd accepted the Horizon project. The cost-saving modifications had come from above, from someone in the development company who'd wanted the project to come in under budget at any cost. The name attached to those orders was someone Elara recognized. A senior executive at Titan Development. The same company her father had been competing with for the past 5 years. The same company that stood to gain the most if Aurelia's reputation was damaged by the Horizon collapse. This wasn't just negligence. It was sabotage. Elara brought the information to her father that evening. Richard read through the security report with the same careful attention he gave to construction blueprints. His expression revealing nothing. "This is circumstantial," he said finally. "Not enough for criminal charges. But enough to raise questions. Enough to shift the narrative. You want to go public with this. I want people to stop acting like I should have prevented something I had no control over." Elara leaned forward. "Lucas Reed was a pawn. Someone used him to damage both my reputation and Aurelia's. I want to know who." And I want them exposed. Richard set down the report. If you're right, you're making powerful enemies. I already have powerful enemies. They've just been hiding behind sympathetic coverage of Nathan's heroism and speculation about my motives. Her father smiled. It was the same expression he wore when closing a particularly difficult deal. I'll have the legal team start building a case. But Elara, if you're going to fight this publicly, you need to be prepared for the counterattack. They'll dig into your life, your marriage, everything. Let them. I have nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide. Elara thought about Nathan. About the 4 years she'd spent pretending she was enough. About the quiet desperation of loving someone who only had room for emergencies. About the choice he'd made in that rubble. Then let them find it, she said. I'm done hiding. The counterattack came 2 weeks later. A series of articles appeared, all from the same anonymous source. They detailed Elara's marriage to Nathan, the emotional distance, the long hours she'd spent at work, the way she'd never quite fit into his world of medical crises and life-or-death decisions. The articles suggested that Elara had been a cold wife, that she'd resented Nathan's dedication to his patients, that she'd given him an ultimatum after the collapse, her or Mara, and when he'd chosen to save Mara's life, she'd punished him with divorce papers. It was all lies. Carefully crafted lies based on fragments of truth. Elara read the articles once, then forwarded them to her father's legal team. Defamation, slander, character assassination. She wanted charges filed. She wanted discovery. She wanted to know who was funding this campaign against her. But even as she fought back legally, she could feel the damage being done. Her team at Aurelia was professional but distant. Clients were polite but hesitant. The sustainable housing project she'd landed was suddenly under review, with the investors asking uncomfortable questions about her judgment and stability. She was being systematically destroyed. Not for what she'd done, but for what she represented. A woman who'd walked away from a hero. A woman who'd chosen her career over supporting her husband's sacrifice. A woman who refused to apologize for wanting more than the scraps of attention left over after everyone else had been saved. You won't believe what happens when she finally fights back. Keep watching, the truth is about to get dangerous. Asterisk. Nathan called her on a Thursday evening. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Elara, we need to talk. I don't think we do. It's about Mara. Something's happened. Elara closed her laptop. What? She tried to hurt herself. 2 days ago. Pills. She's okay, we got to her in time, but... His voice was strained. She's not okay, Elara. She's not handling any of this well. Any of what? The attention. The guilt. The way people look at her like she's responsible for our divorce. The way they look at me like I'm some kind of saint. He paused. I think she needs professional help. Psychiatric care. But she won't accept it from me. She says everything I give her is something she owes me for. She can't separate the kidney from the relationship. What do you want me to do about it? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Another pause. I thought you should know. In case she contacts you again. She already did. 3 weeks ago. She did. Nathan sounded surprised. She didn't tell me. I imagine there's a lot she doesn't tell you, Nathan. It's hard to be honest with someone you think owns you. The line went quiet. Then, is that how you felt? Like I owned you? Elara considered the question. No. I felt like I was fighting for scraps of attention from someone who'd already given away all the important pieces of himself. There's a difference. I never meant. I know. You never mean to hurt anyone. You just do, because you're so busy saving everyone that you don't notice the damage you leave behind. She could hear him breathing on the other end. Processing. Trying to find the right response. Elara felt something cold settle in her chest. How long? They don't know. She's starting treatment, but the prognosis isn't good. 6 months. Maybe a year. I'm sorry. Are you? The question was bitter. Accusatory. Elara understood why. Yes. I'm sorry she's dying. I'm sorry she'll never have the chance to figure out who she is without owing someone for her survival. I'm sorry she spent the last healthy months of her life crushed under the weight of gratitude. He paused. But I'm not sorry I left you, Nathan. Even knowing this. Even understanding that she's dying and you gave her a kidney and it still won't be enough to save her. I'm not sorry. I didn't think you would be. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd promised forever, now connected only by the memory of who they'd been before everything fell apart. The divorce will be final next month, Nathan said finally. My lawyer says everything is in order. Good. Elara. Don't. Whatever you're about to say, don't. We're past apologies. We're past explanations. We're just past. She heard him take a breath. Let it out. Take care of yourself. You too. She hung up and set the phone aside. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming. Elara looked out at the buildings she'd designed, the structures that would outlast all of them, and felt something settle inside her chest. She'd survived the collapse. She'd survived the investigation. She'd survived the character assassination and the divorce and the slow, painful realization that love wasn't always enough. She'd survived all of it. And now, finally, she was ready to do more than just survive. She was ready to build something that mattered. Something that would last. Something that was entirely, completely, unequivocally hers. The National Architecture Innovation Competition announcement arrived 6 weeks after the press conference. Elara was in her office reviewing proposals for a mixed-use development when her assistant brought in the registration packet. This just came from the competition board. Your father thought you'd want to see it immediately. Elara opened the envelope. The competition was prestigious, held every 3 years, with judges from across the country and international attention. The theme this year was Structures of Accountability, Designing for Transparency and Public Trust. Winners received a commission to design a landmark public building and a grant of $5 million. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that could define a career. It was also, Elara realized as she read through the requirements, exactly the kind of platform that would either cement her redemption or destroy what remained of her reputation. The competition required detailed presentations, public judging sessions, and media coverage at every stage. She was still reading when her father appeared in her doorway. You're entering, Richard said. It wasn't a question. I'm considering it. Don't consider. Enter. This is your chance to prove that Horizon Galleria wasn't a failure of vision, but a failure of execution by people who corrupted your work. He moved into the office, closing the door behind him. The architectural community is watching you, Elara. They're waiting to see if you'll retreat or fight. This competition is your answer. Or it's an opportunity for very public failure. You don't fail. You never have. Richard's voice was firm. Enter the competition. Win it. Show them exactly what you're capable of. Elara looked down at the registration form. The deadline was in 2 weeks. The preliminary designs were due 6 weeks after that. The final presentations would be in 3 months. 3 months to design something extraordinary. Something that would prove she deserved to be here. That she'd earned her place through talent, not nepotism or sympathy or the reflected glory of being married to a hero. I'll need full access to Aurelia's resources. Research team. Engineering support. Model shop. You'll have whatever you need. And I work alone. No team collaboration. No input from the board. This is my design. Richard smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. Elara spent the next 2 weeks consuming every detail of the competition requirements. The structure needed to serve a public function while embodying transparency and accountability. It needed to be innovative but feasible. Beautiful but meaningful. She worked 18-hour days, sketching concepts and discarding them. Glass and steel. Stone and light. Forms that opened up rather than closed in. Spaces that invited scrutiny rather than hiding behind facades. She was on her 7th major concept when the idea finally crystallized. A public archive and memorial museum. A building that would house records of corporate and governmental accountability, or the lack thereof. A structure built entirely of transparent materials, where nothing could be hidden. Where the building itself embodied the principle that truth required visibility. Was ambitious, possibly impossible. Exactly what she needed. She registered for the competition on the final day of the deadline. By then, she had preliminary sketches and a concept statement that she'd revised 23 times. She submitted everything digitally at 11:47 p.m. and then sat in her empty office, staring at the confirmation email. She'd committed. There was no backing out now. The list of competitors was released a week later. 47 architects from across the country. Elara recognized most of the names. Established professionals with decades of experience and prestigious projects. She was one of the youngest entrants. And certainly the most controversial. The preliminary judging was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Elara threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even her. She was at the office before dawn and rarely left before midnight. She ate at her desk. Slept on the sofa in her office when the drive home seemed like wasted time. Her design evolved. The transparent walls became a double-layered system that could display information, making the building itself an interactive archive. The interior spaces flowed into each other without traditional barriers, creating sight lines that ensured nothing could happen in one room without being visible from others. The structure would be built on the site of a former courthouse that had been destroyed in a scandal involving judicial corruption, layering meaning onto meaning. It was the best work she'd ever done. She knew it. Could feel it in the way the design came together, each element supporting and enhancing the others. She was refining the structural engineering details when her assistant knocked late one evening. "Ms. Vaughn, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." Elara looked up, her eyes burning from hours of staring at computer screens. "Who?" "Mara Cross." Elara's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't have time for whatever emotional crisis had brought Mara here. She didn't have energy for Nathan's guilt by proxy. But curiosity won out. Again. Send her in. Mara looked worse than she had during her last visit. Thinner. Paler. The leukemia treatment was clearly taking its toll. She moved carefully, like someone whose body had become unreliable. "Ms. Vaughn. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. I'm working." Mara sat without being invited. "I know about the competition. I saw your registration on the list. And I wanted to warn you. There are people who don't want you to succeed. Who are actively working to make sure you fail." Elara set down her stylus. "Who?" "I don't know all the names. But I've heard things. The hospital. People talking when they think I'm not listening." Mara's hands twisted together. "They're planning something. Some kind of public accusation. They want to discredit you during the competition, when the attention is highest." "Who is they?" "Titan Development. Or people connected to them. I don't know exactly. But I heard your name mentioned. And the competition. And something about making sure you never recover from what they're going to reveal." Elara studied the younger woman. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you've been nothing but honest with me, even when I didn't deserve it. Because Nathan talks about you sometimes, when he thinks I'm asleep, and I can hear how much he regrets losing you. Because..." Mara's voice broke slightly. "Because I'm dying, Ms. Vaughn. And I don't want to die knowing I stayed silent while they destroyed you." The office was quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic below. "How long do you have?" Elara asked finally. 4 months. Maybe 6 if the treatment works better than expected. But probably 4. Mara wiped at her eyes. "The kidney Nathan gave me is still functioning. That's not the problem. It's everything else. The leukemia is aggressive. They've tried 3 different treatment protocols. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Nathan is drowning in sorry. He looks at me like I'm a mistake he can fix if he just tries hard enough. Mara laughed, bitter and broken. I used to think being saved would feel like freedom. But it just feels like owing someone a debt I can never repay. Even dying with his kidney inside me feels like theft. Elara understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. The weight of obligation. The impossibility of reciprocation. The way gratitude could become its own kind of prison. What exactly did you hear? She asked. About the accusations. Something about bribery. About you paying off judges or competition officials. They were going to make it look like you'd bought your way into the competition. Like you were trying to rebuild your reputation through corruption instead of talent. That's absurd. The competition registration is public record. The judging is blind until the finals. They know that. But they're counting on the accusation being enough. On people believing it because it fits the narrative they've already built about you. Mara leaned forward. They're going to time it for maximum damage. Right before the preliminary judging. When you won't have time to defend yourself before the presentation. Elara's mind was already racing through implications. Countermeasures. Ways to protect herself. Do you have any proof? Names? Documentation? No. Just what I overheard. I'm sorry, I know it's not much. It's enough to prepare. Elara pulled out her phone, started typing notes. Thank you for the warning. Mara stood slowly. Ms. Vaughn. Can I ask you something? What? Do you think Nathan will be okay? After I'm gone. Elara looked up at the young woman who'd inadvertently destroyed her marriage and was now dying with her ex-husband's kidney. Nathan will do what he always does. He'll blame himself. He'll work himself to exhaustion trying to save other people. He'll avoid dealing with his grief until it becomes someone else's emergency. And then he'll repeat the cycle. That's what I thought. Mara moved toward the door. For what it's worth, I don't think he ever stopped loving you. I think he just didn't know how to love you and be himself at the same time. That's not worth much, Elara said quietly. But thank you for saying it anyway. After Mara left, Elara sat in silence for a long moment. Then she called her father's head of security and the legal team. If Titan was planning an attack, she was going to be ready. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of design work and defensive preparation. Elara finished her preliminary submission while simultaneously documenting every aspect of her competition registration. Every email, every payment, every communication with the competition board. She created a paper trail so thorough that any accusation of impropriety would be immediately disprovable. She also had her father's security team investigate Titan Development's recent activities. If they were planning something, she wanted to know before it happened. The preliminary judging arrived on a cold Tuesday morning. 47 architects presenting their concepts to a panel of 12 judges. The presentations were open to the public, held in a converted warehouse that had been transformed into a temporary exhibition space. Elara arrived early. Her preliminary designs were already mounted, detailed renderings of the transparency memorial, cross-sections showing the flowing interior spaces, material specifications that emphasized visibility and light. It was strong work. She knew it was strong work. But strong work didn't matter if no one was willing to see it. The presentations began at 9. Elara was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. She watched the other architects present, taking notes on their concepts. Most were solid but conventional. A few were genuinely innovative. None had the layered meaning of her transparency memorial. She was reviewing her presentation notes when she felt her phone buzz. A text from her father's head of security. They're moving. Check your email. Elara opened her email. There were 3 new messages, all from journalists requesting comment on allegations of impropriety regarding her competition entry. The messages were vague but urgent. All demanded immediate response. It was happening, exactly as Mara had warned. Elara forwarded the emails to her legal team and then walked out to the exhibition floor. She needed to see how this was playing out in real time. The rumors were already spreading. She could see it in the way people looked at her. The whispers that stopped when she passed. Someone had released a story, probably to social media first, where it could spread before fact-checkers caught up, suggesting that Elara had bribed competition officials to ensure her entry was accepted despite her controversial history. It was exactly calculated to cause maximum damage with minimum evidence. Elara pulled out her phone and called her father. "I know," Richard said immediately. "The legal team is already drafting a response. We'll have documentation posted within the hour proving every allegation is false. That won't matter. The accusation is out there. People will believe it. Some will. But we're not fighting for some people. We're fighting for the judges who matter, who understand how to evaluate evidence." He paused. "Are you ready for your presentation?" "Yes." "Then focus on that. Let us handle the rest." Elara hung up and returned to the staging area. She had 2 hours before her presentation. 2 hours to decide how to handle this. She could address the allegations directly, which would make her look defensive. Or she could ignore them and let her work speak for itself, which might make her look guilty. Neither option was good. She was still wrestling with the decision when one of the competition organizers approached her. "Ms. Vaughn, we've received some concerning allegations about your entry. The board needs to speak with you before your presentation." Here it was. The attack in full force. Elara followed the organizer to a private room where 3 board members waited. They looked uncomfortable, embarrassed, but determined. "Ms. Vaughn, we need to address some allegations that have surfaced regarding your registration. I'm aware of the allegations. They're false. We'd like to believe that, but we need to see documentation. Proof that your registration was handled according to standard procedures." Elara pulled out her tablet and opened the file she'd prepared weeks ago. Registration confirmations, payment receipts, email threads, timestamps proving she'd submitted everything through standard channels with no special accommodations. She walked them through every detail. Methodical, clinical, irrefutable. The board members reviewed the documentation in silence. Finally, the senior member nodded. "This appears to be in order. We apologize for the inconvenience, but given the public nature of the allegations, you had to investigate." "I understand." Lara stood. "Am I cleared to present?" "Yes, absolutely." "And Ms. Vaughn?" The board member looked genuinely apologetic. "For what it's worth, we're aware that someone is trying to sabotage your entry. We won't let baseless accusations influence our judging." "Thank you." Elara returned to the exhibition floor with 15 minutes to spare before her presentation. The crowd had grown. Word of the allegations had brought people specifically to see how she'd handle it. She could feel their attention like pressure against her skin. She took her place at the presentation podium and looked out at the audience. Judges in the front row. Other architects scattered throughout. Journalists with cameras. And in the back, partly hidden, several people she recognized from Titan Development's PR team. They'd come to watch her fail. Elara smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. "Good afternoon. My name is Elara Vaughn, and I'm here to present my preliminary concept for the National Architecture Innovation Competition." She clicked to her first slide, the transparency memorial rendered in golden afternoon light. "This is a building that refuses to hide. A structure that embodies the principle that accountability requires visibility. A space where truth cannot be buried because the architecture itself won't allow it." She walked them through every element. The double-layer transparent walls that could display archived information. The flowing interior spaces without hidden rooms. The site selection, a former courthouse destroyed by corruption, and how that history informed the design. The material specifications that prioritized clarity over concealment. As she presented, she watched the judges, saw them leaning forward, taking notes, asking questions that showed they understood exactly what she was trying to achieve. She didn't mention the allegations, didn't acknowledge the sabotage attempt. She let her work speak for itself. When she finished, the applause was genuine, sustained. She'd won this round. But as she stepped down from the podium, she saw Mara standing near the exit. The younger woman looked stricken, terrified. Elara made her way through the crowd, ignoring the journalists who tried to stop her for comments. "What's wrong?" "I'm so sorry," Mara whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't realize." "Realize what?" "The accusations. The bribery allegations." Mara's hands were shaking. "They came from me. Or they used things I said. Things Nathan told me about you. About your father's company. About connections you might have. I was talking to someone I thought was a friend, another patient at the hospital, and she must have..." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know she was working for them. I'm so sorry." Elara felt something cold settle in her chest. Who was she? This friend. Her name was Sarah something. She was in for treatment too. We talked for hours. She asked about you once, seemed so sympathetic, and I just... Mara's voice broke. "I thought I was helping. Explaining why the competition meant so much to you. Why you needed to prove yourself. I didn't realize she was gathering information to use against you." "Sarah from Titan Development's legal team," Elara said quietly. "They planted someone to get close to you. To extract information. I'm so stupid. I'm so... You're dying and desperate for human connection. They exploited that." Elara's voice was flat. "It's not your fault. It's calculated manipulation. But I gave them ammunition. I'm the reason they knew how to hurt you." Elara looked at the younger woman. Frail, guilt-ridden, carrying Nathan's kidney and a death sentence, and now the weight of being used as a weapon against someone who'd never done anything to harm her. "Mara, listen to me. You were a tool. They would have found another way if not through you. This is not your burden to carry. But, go home. Rest. Stop letting Nathan's guilt and my ex-marriage and corporate warfare consume what little time you have left." Elara's voice softened slightly. "You don't owe anyone anything. Not Nathan. Not me. Not the people who used you. Stop trying to repay debts that were never yours to begin with." Mara nodded, wiping at her tears. "Your presentation was beautiful. The transparency memorial. It's exactly what the world needs. Thank you." After Mara left, Elara stood in the emptying exhibition space and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd been attacked using information extracted from a dying woman who'd been manipulated by people pretending to be friends. It was vicious, calculated, effective, and it had failed anyway. What Elara discovers next will change everything, and someone's lies are about to be exposed in the worst way possible. Don't look away now. The preliminary results were announced 2 weeks later. Elara advanced to the finals. Top 10 out of 47 entries. The day after the announcement, investigative journalists published a detailed exposé on Titan Development's tactics. The planted hospital patient. The manufactured allegations. The systematic campaign to destroy Elara's reputation. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Titan's stock dropped 12% in a single day. 3 executives resigned. Criminal investigations were opened into their role in the Horizon Galleria collapse. Elara watched it unfold from her office with a sense of grim satisfaction. She hadn't asked for this war, but she was going to win it. She was finalizing her competition presentation, the full detailed design that would be judged in the finals, when Nathan called. "Congratulations on advancing to the finals." "Thank you. Elara, I need to tell you something. About Mara." She closed her laptop. "I'm listening. She's deteriorating rapidly. The leukemia is winning. She has maybe 2 weeks left." His voice was strained. "She wants to see you. Before the end." "Why?" "She says she needs to tell you something. Something she couldn't say before." Elara was silent for a moment. She didn't want to spend her remaining time before the finals dealing with Mara's guilt and Nathan's grief. But something in his tone suggested this was important. "When?" "Tomorrow. The hospital. She's weak, but she's coherent. I'll be there." The next afternoon, Elara found herself walking through the oncology ward where Mara had been moved. The room was private, filled with flowers that Nathan had probably ordered. Mara lay in the bed, connected to multiple monitors, her skin nearly translucent. She looked like she was already halfway gone. "Ms. Vaughn." Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." Elara pulled a chair close to the bed. "Nathan said you wanted to tell me something." "I lied. About the accusations. About overhearing things at the hospital." Mara's eyes were filled with tears. "I didn't overhear anything. Someone from Titan approached me directly. Offered me money. A lot of money. Enough to cover experimental treatments that might extend my life." Elara went very still. "What did they want in exchange?" "Information about you. About your relationship with Nathan. About the competition. About anything that could be used against you." Mara's breath was labored. "I said no at first. But then they showed me the experimental trials. The survival rates. The possibility of more time. And I thought." Her voice broke. "I thought maybe if I had more time I could figure out how to live with what Nathan gave me. How to be worth saving. So you gave them information. Small things at first. Then bigger things. I told myself I was just answering questions. That I wasn't really hurting anyone. But then I saw what they did with it. The bribery accusations. The planted story. The way they tried to destroy you during the preliminary judging." Tears ran down her face. "I was the source, Ms. Vaughn. Everything they used against you came from me. Not from some fake friend. From me. Directly." Elara sat back in her chair, processing this. Mara hadn't been manipulated by a planted patient. She'd been bought. She'd sold information about Elara in exchange for the promise of more time. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm dying anyway. The experimental treatment didn't work. I took their money and gave them what they wanted, and I'm dying anyway." Mara's voice was bitter. "And because you deserve to know the truth. You've been nothing but honest with me, even when I didn't deserve it. I owed you that much. You didn't owe me anything. I owed you everything. You let your husband give me his kidney. You didn't fight it. You didn't make him choose." Mara closed her eyes. "And I repaid you by helping the people who wanted to destroy you. Sorry. It's not enough, but I'm sorry." Elara looked at the dying woman in the hospital bed. Felt anger rise and then dissipate. What was the point? Mara would be dead in 2 weeks. The damage had already been done and survived. Holding on to rage would only poison her own peace. Did Nathan know about any of this? No. He still doesn't. He thinks I overheard things. I couldn't tell him. He already looks at me like I'm a failure. Like he gave up a kidney for nothing. Mara opened her eyes. "Please don't tell him. Let him think I was just naive. Let him grieve someone who was worth saving. He gave you the kidney knowing the risks. That was his choice. But I'm not who he thought I was. I'm not some innocent victim. I'm someone who sold information about his ex-wife for the promise of more time." Mara's voice dropped to almost nothing. "I'm not worth the sacrifice he made." Lara stood. "That's not for you to decide. You don't get to determine the value of Nathan's choices. He made them. He lives with them. That's on him, not you. Will you tell him?" Elara considered this. Nathan was already drowning in guilt over Mara's impending death. Learning that she'd betrayed Elara wouldn't change anything except add another layer of pain. No. What would be the point? "Thank you." Mara's eyes were closing. "Your memorial. The Transparency Building. It's beautiful. I hope you win." "So do I." Elara left the hospital and drove back to her office. She should have felt angry. Betrayed. But all she felt was tired. Tired of other people's guilt. Tired of being collateral damage in other people's desperate choices. She had a competition to win. That was all that mattered now. The final presentations were scheduled for 2 weeks later. Elara spent every available hour perfecting her design. The Transparency Memorial had evolved into something extraordinary. A building that didn't just house records of accountability, but actively demonstrated it through every architectural choice. The day before the finals, Nathan called. Mara died this morning. Peacefully. Elara was in her office, surrounded by presentation materials. I'm sorry. She asked about you. Near the end. Said she hoped you'd win the competition. That was kind of her. Was it? Nathan's voice was strange. Or was it guilt? Elara went very still. What do you mean? I found some things. After she died. Emails on her laptop. Bank transfers. Communication with Titan Development. Long pause. She sold them information, Elara. About you. About us. She was the source of the bribery allegations. So he'd found out anyway. I know, Elara said quietly. She told me. Before she died. And you didn't tell me. What would it have changed? She was dying. You were grieving. Adding betrayal to that grief seemed cruel. I gave her my kidney. Yes, you did. And she took it knowing what she'd done. She lived with that guilt every day. That was her burden, Nathan. Not yours. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Processing. Trying to reconcile the woman he'd tried to save with the woman who'd sold out his ex-wife. I don't know how to feel about any of this, he said finally. Then don't feel anything. Just let her be dead. Let it be over. Is that what you're doing? Just letting it be over? Yes. Because I have more important things to do than carry around anger for someone who can't apologize anymore. Elara looked at her presentation materials. I have a competition to win tomorrow. That's where my energy is going. Good luck, Elara. I mean that. I know you do. After he hung up, Elara sat in silence for a moment. Then she returned to her work. The Transparency Memorial was ready. She was ready. Tomorrow she would prove herself. Tomorrow she would win. Tomorrow everything would finally be worth it. The final competition presentation took place in a converted theater, with hundreds of spectators and live streaming to architectural schools across the country. The remaining 10 finalists would each have 30 minutes to present their completed designs. Elara was scheduled to present last. She watched the other presentations with professional detachment. They were all strong. Some were brilliant. She particularly admired a sustainable community center design that integrated water reclamation systems into the architecture itself. But none of them had the layered meaning of her Transparency Memorial. None of them embodied their theme as completely as her design. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage with steady confidence. Set up her presentation materials. Looked out at the audience. Judges, fellow architects, journalists, and in the back row her father. Richard Vaughn nodded once. Permission. Or perhaps acknowledgement that she'd earned this moment entirely on her own. Good evening. I'm Elara Vaughn, and I'm here to present the Transparency Memorial, a building that doesn't just house accountability, but demands it. She walked them through every element. The double-layer glass walls that could display archived information, making the building itself an active participant in public memory. The interior spaces designed without hidden corners, where sightlines ensured nothing could happen in secret. The structural systems left visible rather than concealed, demonstrating the principle that trust requires visibility. She explained the site selection, the former courthouse destroyed by corruption, and how that history informed every architectural decision. She showed them the material specifications, the engineering solutions, the way natural light would interact with the transparent surfaces to create an ever-changing display of shadow and revelation. This building refuses to hide, she said. It refuses to conceal. It insists that accountability can only exist when truth is visible, when records can't be buried, when power can't operate in darkness. A pause. 12 people died at Horizon Galleria because someone hid the truth. Because modifications were concealed. Because accountability was optional. This building ensures that can never happen within its walls. It is architecture as witness, as monument, as promise. When she finished, the silence lasted several seconds. Then the applause began. Not polite, thunderous. She'd done it. The judges deliberated for 2 hours. Elara waited in the green room with the other finalists, making small talk, pretending her entire future wasn't being decided in a closed room somewhere above them. Finally, they were called back to the theater. The head judge took the stage. This year's entries demonstrated exceptional innovation and thoughtful engagement with our theme of accountability and transparency. The decision was difficult. But one design stood out for its complete integration of concept and execution. For its courage in addressing recent tragedy. For its refusal to separate architectural form from moral purpose. Elara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. The winner of this year's National Architecture Innovation Competition is Elara Vaughn, for the Transparency Memorial. The theater erupted. Elara stood, her legs somehow still working, and walked to the stage. Accepted the award. Shook hands with the judges. Smiled for photographs. She'd won. She'd actually won. The reception afterward was a blur of congratulations and interview requests. Elara answered questions with professional grace, explained her design philosophy, accepted praise from architects she'd admired for years. Her father found her near the end of the evening. Well done. Thank you. The board will be pleased. This is excellent publicity for Aurelia. Elara smiled. Even in victory, Richard Vaughn thought about business first. I'm glad I could help the company's reputation. That's not why I'm pleased. Her father's expression softened slightly. I'm pleased because you proved yourself. On your own terms. Without compromise. It was perhaps the closest thing to paternal pride Richard Vaughn had ever expressed. Elara felt something warm settle in her chest. I learned from the best. No, you surpassed the best. That design. He gestured toward the displayed renderings. That's not something I could have created. That's entirely yours. They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the crowd celebrate around them. What happens now? Richard asked. Now I build it. I make sure it's constructed exactly as designed. I ensure that nothing gets modified or compromised or changed to save costs. Elara's voice was firm. I make sure 12 people didn't die for nothing. Good. Richard nodded. I'll assign you whatever resources you need. This memorial will be built right. After her father left, Elara found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. She had dozens of messages. Congratulations from colleagues. Interview requests from architectural magazines. One message from Nathan. You deserved this. Congratulations. Simple. Honest. Everything they'd once been to each other. Distilled into 6 words. She typed back. Thank you. Then she put away her phone and returned to the reception. There would be time later to process everything. The victory. The vindication. The knowledge that she'd built something meaningful from the ruins of her marriage, and the collapse that had nearly destroyed her. Tonight she would celebrate. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of turning her vision into reality. But tonight, for the first time in months, Elara Vaughn allowed herself to simply exist in the moment of triumph she'd earned entirely on her own. The morning after her competition victory, Elara woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. She'd slept in her own apartment for the first time in weeks, having finally allowed herself a night away from work. The sunlight streaming through her floor-to-ceiling windows felt different somehow. Warmer. More real. She scrolled through the messages. Most were congratulations. A few were interview requests from major architectural publications. One was from her father's assistant, marked urgent. Board meeting moved up to 9 a.m. Your presence required. Elara checked the time. 7:45. She had just over an hour. She dressed carefully. A tailored suit in charcoal gray, professional but not stuffy. The walking cast was finally gone, replaced by a slight limp she barely noticed anymore. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone different than the woman who'd been pinned under rubble 6 months ago. Someone harder. Stronger. Someone who'd stopped waiting for permission to exist. The Aurelia Group headquarters was buzzing when she arrived. Her father's assistant met her at the elevator with coffee and a tablet showing the morning's financial news. "You should see this before the meeting." Elara took the tablet. The headline made her pause. Aurelia Group stock surges following daughter's competition win. Questions raised about company leadership structure. She scanned the article quickly. Investors were pleased with her victory. The publicity was good for Aurelia's reputation. But some were questioning why Richard Vaughn's daughter had been quietly installed as head of the architectural division without public announcement. Others were speculating about succession planning. Whether Elara was being groomed to eventually take over the company. "Your father wants to address this directly," the assistant said as they walked toward the conference room. "The board has concerns." Course they did. Elara had won the competition on merit, but to the outside world, and apparently to some board members, it would always look like nepotism. Like Richard Vaughn pulling strings for his daughter. She entered the conference room to find 12 board members already seated. Her father sat at the head of the table. His expression unreadable. "Elara, thank you for coming on short notice." She took the empty seat halfway down the table. "Of course." Richard didn't waste time. "The board has some questions about your position at Aurelia. Given the recent publicity and market speculation, we need to clarify the nature of your employment and future role in the company." One of the older board members, Harrison Wells, who'd voted against her hiring, leaned forward. "Ms. Vaughn, there's been significant speculation that your competition victory was facilitated by company resources. That Aurelia provided you with unfair advantages over other competitors." "I used Aurelia's resources exactly as specified in my employment contract," Elara said evenly. "The same resources available to any head of an architectural division at a firm of this size. My design was my own. My presentation was my own. The victory was earned. Nevertheless, the perception," Elara interrupted, "is being manufactured by people who want to discredit both me and this company. The same people who tried to destroy my reputation after Horizon Galleria. The same people who are now facing criminal charges for corporate manslaughter." She met Wells's eyes. "I won't apologize for succeeding despite their efforts." Another board member spoke up. "There are also questions about your long-term intentions. Whether you're planning to remain in the architectural division, or if you have ambitions for broader leadership roles." There it was. They were worried she was after her father's position. "I have no interest in running Aurelia Group," Elara said clearly. "I'm an architect. That's what I'm good at. That's what I want to do. I joined this company to rebuild my career and prove my worth as a designer. Nothing more. But surely, as Richard's daughter, I've spent my entire life watching him build this company. I know exactly how much work it requires, how much sacrifice, how much of yourself you have to give up to run an empire." Elara's voice was steady. "I've already spent 4 years being defined by someone else's mission. I'm not interested in repeating that pattern." The room went quiet. Her father's expression hadn't changed, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Understanding maybe. Or respect. "Then what do you want, Ms. Vaughn?" Wells asked. "I want to build the Transparency Memorial. I want to oversee its construction personally, ensuring it's built exactly as designed. I want to continue leading Aurelia's architectural division and producing work that matters." He paused. "And I want to stop having my achievements questioned because of whose daughter I am. That may not be possible." The perception. Then change the perception. Elara pulled out her phone and opened a document. "I've drafted a statement for release to the press. It clarifies that I joined Aurelia on merit, that I competed in the innovation competition using only standard industry resources, and that I have no ambitions for executive leadership. It also announces that I'll be donating my entire competition prize, $5 million, to a scholarship fund for architecture students from underprivileged backgrounds." She sent the document to the board members' tablets. Watch them read through it. The $5 million had been hers. Prize money she'd earned. But she understood optics. She understood that sometimes you had to give away what you'd won to prove you weren't in it for the money. "This is generous," one board member said slowly. "It's strategic," Elara corrected. "It removes any suggestion that I competed for financial gain. It demonstrates commitment to the profession rather than personal enrichment. And it creates positive publicity for Aurelia while making it clear that I'm not trying to leverage my father's wealth." Her father spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "The board will vote on whether to approve this statement and Ms. Vaughn's continued leadership of the architectural division." The vote was 10-2 in her favor. Even Wells voted yes, though he looked like it pained him. After the meeting, Richard walked with Elara back to her office. "The scholarship fund wasn't necessary." "Yes, it was. You know it was." He nodded slowly. "You're better at this than I expected. Politics. The optics. I learned from watching you." Elara paused at her office door. "But I meant what I said in there. I don't want your job. I don't want to run Aurelia." "I know. That's why you'd probably be good at it." Richard smiled slightly. "But I'm glad you want to build instead. The world has enough executives. Not enough architects willing to create something meaningful." After he left, Elara sat at her desk and stared at the statement she'd drafted. $5 million. But somehow she felt lighter, freer. She was pulling up the transparency memorial plans when her assistant knocked. "Ms. Vaughn, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent and personal. Her name is Lydia Chen." Elara didn't recognize the name. "Did she say what it's about?" "She says she's from the Vaughn Foundation." "Your mother's foundation." Elara went very still. Her mother had died when she was 16. The foundation had been established in her memory, dedicated to supporting women in STEM fields. Elara had attended a few early events, then distanced herself as her father had become increasingly consumed by work. She hadn't thought about the foundation in years. Send her in. Lydia Chen was in her 50s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and a portfolio under her arm. She shook Elara's hand firmly. "Ms. Vaughn, thank you for seeing me. I'm the current director of the Vaughn Foundation. I've been wanting to meet with you for some time. I wasn't aware the foundation was still active." "Very much so. We've provided scholarships to over 300 women in the past 15 years. Funded research programs. Created mentorship networks." Lydia sat down. "Your mother's legacy has touched a lot of lives." Elara felt something tighten in her chest. "I'm glad. But I'm not sure why you're here." "Because the foundation needs leadership. I'm retiring next year, and the board has been discussing succession. Your name keeps coming up. I'm an architect, not a non-profit director. You're also someone who just donated $5 million to create an architecture scholarship fund. Someone who understands what it means to fight for recognition in a male-dominated field. Someone who carries your mother's name and her vision." Lydia leaned forward. "The foundation doesn't need a full-time director. It needs someone who can provide strategic direction, who can help us evolve our mission, who can inspire the next generation of women the way your mother inspired her generation." "I never knew my mother was an inspiration to anyone. She died when I was too young to understand who she was beyond being my mother. Catherine Vaughn was a brilliant materials scientist. She developed 3 patents that revolutionized sustainable construction materials. She did it while fighting gender discrimination in every laboratory she worked in. She created the foundation because she was tired of watching talented women give up their dreams because no one would give them a chance." Lydia opened her portfolio and pulled out photographs. "These are some of the women we've supported. Researchers, engineers, architects, women who wouldn't have had careers without your mother's vision." Elara looked at the photographs. Young women in laboratories, on construction sites, in design studios, doing the work they loved because someone had believed in them. "What would you need from me?" "Quarterly board meetings. Strategic input on funding priorities. Occasional public appearances to represent the foundation." Lydia paused. And maybe, when you're ready, help us expand our mission to include a mentorship component. Connect established professionals with young women who are just starting out. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. You're exactly the right person. You've survived everything the world threw at you and came out stronger. You've proven that success doesn't require compromising your integrity. That's what these young women need to see. That it's possible. The revelation that's about to unfold will shake everything Elara thought she knew about her past. Stay with us for what comes next. After Lydia left, Elara sat alone in her office, surrounded by the photographs of women her mother had helped. Women she'd never known existed. A legacy she'd never known she was part of. She pulled out her phone and dialed her father. Why didn't you tell me? About the foundation. About everything it's accomplished. Richard was quiet for a moment. Because you were 16 when your mother died. Grieving. Angry. You didn't want to hear about her legacy. You wanted her back. And then you went away to college, and when you came back you were so determined to make it on your own. I thought the foundation would feel like pressure. Like another expectation you'd have to live up to. So you just let me forget about her. I let you find your own path. The same way Catherine would have wanted. He paused. But the foundation is yours, Elara. It always has been. Your mother's will established it in your name. When you turn 30, control of the endowment transfers to you. Elara felt something cold settle in her stomach. What? Your mother left most of her estate to the foundation. It's currently worth about $40 million. In 6 months, when you turn 30, you become the primary trustee. You'll have full control over how that money is used. $40 million. Your mother's patents generated significant royalties. The foundation has been managed conservatively, so the endowment has grown considerably. Elara set down her phone, put it on speaker, tried to process what she was hearing. You're telling me that in 6 months, I inherit a $40 million foundation? You inherit the responsibility for a $40 million foundation, her father corrected. The money isn't yours to spend. It's meant to support women in STEM fields. To continue your mother's work. Does anyone else know about this? The foundation board. My legal team. No one else. I wanted to tell you after the competition. After you'd proven yourself professionally. So the inheritance couldn't be used to diminish your achievements. Elara laughed. Came out bitter and sharp. So I'm not just Richard Vaughn's daughter. I'm about to become a wealthy heiress in my own right. That's perfect. Because what my reputation really needs is more speculation about privilege and nepotism. Or, her father said quietly, it's an opportunity to do something meaningful with resources most people never have access to. To honor your mother's legacy while building your own. After hanging up, Elara sat in silence for a long time. Then she pulled up the foundation's website and started reading. Really reading. About her mother's patents. Her research. The hundreds of women she'd supported through the foundation. Catherine Vaughn hadn't just been a scientist. She'd been a force. Someone who'd refused to let the world diminish her. Someone who'd used her success to lift up other women fighting the same battles. Someone Elara had barely known, but who suddenly felt very familiar. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. Can we meet? I need to talk to you. Elara stared at the message. She hadn't seen Nathan since Mara's death 3 weeks ago. Hadn't wanted to. What was left to say? But curiosity won out again. Or maybe just the need for closure. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. My office. Nathan arrived exactly on time, looking older than she remembered. The kidney donation had taken its toll. He moved more carefully now, seemed perpetually tired. He sat across from her desk without being invited. Thank you for seeing me. You said you needed to talk. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For the choice I made in the Rubble. For giving away a kidney while our marriage was falling apart. For not seeing that I was losing you until it was too late. He paused. And for believing the best in Mara when she didn't deserve it. She was dying. She was desperate. People do desperate things. She betrayed you. Sold information to the people trying to destroy you. And I was so busy playing hero that I never noticed. Nathan's voice was thick with self-recrimination. I gave her a kidney, and she used the time I bought her to hurt you. How do I live with that? The same way you live with everything else. You accept that you can't save everyone. That sometimes your help causes more harm than good. That being a hero isn't always heroic. Elara's voice was gentle but firm. You gave Mara a kidney because that's who you are. What she did with the time you gave her was her choice, not yours. You don't get to take credit for other people's decisions, good or bad. I destroyed our marriage for nothing. You destroyed our marriage because you never learned how to love someone without making it about saving them. Mara was just the proof of something that was already true. Elara leaned forward. Nathan, you're a brilliant surgeon. You save lives. That's important work. But until you figure out that not everyone in your life needs to be rescued, you're going to keep hurting the people who just want to be your equal. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. I heard about the competition win. And the foundation. Your mother's foundation. How did you? I still have friends at the hospital. One of them mentioned that you'd be taking over the Vaughn Foundation. That you're apparently about to become a very wealthy woman in your own right. He smiled sadly. I always knew you came from money. Your father's company, the way you carried yourself. But I never realized how much. Neither did I until recently. Does it change anything? Knowing you're about to inherit millions. Elara considered this. It changes what I can do. The scale of impact I can have. But it doesn't change who I am. I'm still the same person who was pinned under rubble while you saved someone else. I'm sorry for that. More than you know. I know. But sorry doesn't rebuild what was broken. Elara stood, signaling the conversation was over. I hope you find what you're looking for, Nathan. I hope you figure out how to be with someone without needing them to need you. But I can't be part of that process. Nathan stood as well. Moved toward the door. Paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. The competition. The memorial. Everything you've built from the wreckage. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I was always this strong. You just never noticed because I didn't need saving. After he left, Elara returned to her desk and pulled up the transparency memorial plans. She had work to do. A building to construct. A foundation to lead. A legacy to honor. She had spent 4 years being defined by Nathan's mission. 6 months fighting to prove herself despite systematic attacks on her reputation. And now she stood on the edge of inheriting resources that would make her financially independent, professionally established, and personally free. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd filed for divorce thinking she'd be leaving with nothing. Instead, she'd discovered she'd always had everything. She just hadn't known it yet. Her father called that evening while she was reviewing foundation documents in her apartment. Lydia Chen contacted me. She said you're considering taking on the foundation leadership. I'm considering it. It's a lot to take on alongside the memorial construction. You can handle both. You're more capable than you realize. Elara smiled at that. I'm starting to figure that out. There's something else you should know. About your mother's will. About why she structured the foundation the way she did. I'm listening. Catherine knew she was sick long before she died. The cancer had been caught early, but she knew there was a chance she wouldn't survive. She spent the last year of her life setting up the foundation and establishing the endowment. Richard's voice was thick with emotion. She did it specifically for you. She wanted to make sure you'd have resources that were entirely yours. That didn't come from me. That you'd earned through carrying her name and her legacy. Why didn't she tell me? You were 15 when she established it. Still a child. She thought you'd have time to grow into the responsibility. She didn't know she'd only have another year. Elara felt tears burning behind her eyes. I barely remember her. Just fragments. The way she smelled like lavender. how she'd hum while working on equations, the sound of her laugh. She would be proud of you, of the architect you've become, of the woman who refused to be diminished by circumstance or malice, of the daughter who's about to continue her work. Richard paused. She loved you fiercely, Elara. Everything she built was for you. After hanging up, Elara sat in her dark apartment and let herself cry. For her mother. For the 4 years she'd wasted trying to be enough for someone who couldn't see her. For the woman she'd been before the collapse. For all the versions of herself she'd shed to become who she was now. When the tears finally stopped, she felt cleansed. Ready. She pulled up her calendar and started making plans. The Transparency Memorial groundbreaking was scheduled for 3 months out. Her 30th birthday and the foundation transfer was 6 months away. The divorce would be final in 2 weeks. She had work to do. Buildings to construct. Women to support. A legacy to honor. But first she had one more thing to handle. The next morning Elara called a press conference. Not through Aurelia's PR team. Not with her father's approval. Just her standing in front of cameras, telling her story on her own terms. My name is Elara Vaughn. 6 months ago, I was pinned under rubble while my husband chose to save someone else. 3 months ago, I filed for divorce and was systematically attacked by people trying to destroy my reputation. Last week, I won the National Architecture Innovation Competition. And in 6 months, I will inherit control of the Catherine Vaughan Foundation, which supports women in STEM fields. She paused, letting that sink in. Letting the journalists process the information. Letting the world understand what they'd been trying to tear down. I'm not telling you this to brag or to defend myself against accusations of privilege. I'm telling you this because I'm tired of my accomplishments being treated as suspicious. I'm tired of being defined by whose daughter I am, whose wife I was, or how much money I have access to. I'm an architect. I design buildings that serve people. That honor truth. That refuse to hide. The Transparency Memorial will be built exactly as designed. It will stand as proof that accountability matters. That truth matters. That 12 people died at Horizon Galleria not because of design failure, but because powerful people valued profit over human life. And it will stand as proof that I earned my place in this profession, not through my father's influence, not through my mother's money, but through my own talent and determination. She looked directly into the cameras. So if you want to question my success, question it. Investigate it. Scrutinize every detail. You'll find that I followed every rule, met every standard, and earned every victory. And then maybe you'll start asking why successful women are always assumed to have cheated while successful men are celebrated for their merit. The press conference lasted another 30 minutes. Elara answered every question with calm precision. Yes, she would be donating her competition prize money. Yes, she would be taking leadership of her mother's foundation. Yes, she was Richard Vaughn's daughter, but that didn't diminish her own achievements. Yes, her ex-husband had given a kidney to the woman whose betrayal had nearly destroyed Elara's reputation. And no, that irony wasn't lost on her. When it was over, Elara walked out of the building and straight into a firestorm of social media reaction. Some people called her arrogant. Others called her brave. A few pointed out that she just revealed herself as a soon-to-be wealthy heiress, which made her previous struggles seem performative. But mostly women responded. Women in architecture. Women in STEM. Women who'd been questioned and scrutinized and diminished. Women who saw their own battles reflected in Elara's story. By evening, #Transparency Matters was trending. Women sharing their own stories of having to prove themselves twice as hard because someone assumed they'd been given opportunities rather than earning them. Elara watched it unfold from her apartment, feeling something shift in her chest. She'd been trying to escape the spotlight, to just do good work quietly. But maybe that was the wrong approach. Maybe visibility was its own form of accountability. Maybe refusing to hide was the point. You won't believe how this story ends. Everything comes full circle in the most unexpected way. Don't miss what happens next. The Transparency Memorial groundbreaking took place on a sunny Tuesday morning. 3 months had passed since the competition victory. The site had been cleared. The foundation had been poured. Elara stood in front of a crowd of city officials, journalists, and architectural colleagues, holding a ceremonial shovel. Her father stood to her left. The mayor stood to her right. And in the crowd, she spotted several faces from the Vaughn Foundation, women her mother had supported, now successful in their fields, who'd come to witness this moment. "This building will stand as proof that truth requires visibility," Elara said into the microphone. "That accountability cannot exist in darkness. That the best way to honor those we've lost is to build something that ensures their deaths mattered." She looked at the crowd. 12 people died at Horizon Galleria because someone hid the truth. This memorial ensures that within these walls, truth cannot be hidden. Accountability cannot be avoided. Justice cannot be buried. She drove the shovel into the earth. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. And Elara felt, for the first time since the collapse, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The construction took 8 months. Elara was on site every day, monitoring every detail. She reviewed every material shipment, approved every structural modification, ensured that what was being built matched exactly what she'd designed. She wouldn't let anyone alter her vision. Not this time. Her 30th birthday came and went quietly. The foundation transfer happened with minimal fanfare, just signatures on legal documents and a private ceremony with the board. Elara was now responsible for $40 million dedicated to supporting women in STEM. She immediately established the Catherine Vaughn Memorial Mentorship Program, pairing established professionals with young women just starting their careers. She funded 10 new scholarships specifically for architecture students. She created emergency grants for women facing discrimination or harassment in their workplaces. She used her mother's money to build her mother's vision. And in doing so, she finally understood who Catherine Vaughn had been. The Transparency Memorial opened 1 year after the Horizon Galleria collapse. The ceremony was attended by the families of those who'd died, by the survivors, by city officials and architectural professionals and journalists from across the country. Elara gave a brief speech. She kept it simple. Let the building speak for itself. And it did. The transparent walls glowed in the sunlight. The visible structural systems demonstrated exactly how the building supported itself. The interior spaces flowed together, sight lines ensuring nothing remained hidden. And on the walls, displayed in scrolling digital text, were the names of the 12 people who'd died. The full investigation report. The criminal charges against Titan development executives. The complete, unedited truth. A building that refused to let anyone forget. That insisted on accountability. That made justice visible. After the ceremony, Elara walked through the empty memorial, running her hands along the transparent walls. This was what she'd built from wreckage, from pain, from the choice Nathan had made in that rubble. She'd been right to file for divorce, right to leave, right to demand more than being someone's afterthought. She heard footsteps behind her, turned to find Nathan standing in the entrance, looking at the memorial with something like awe. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "Everything you said it would be. Thank you. I heard about the foundation. About your mother's legacy. About everything you've built this year." He moved closer. "You've become someone extraordinary, Elara. I was always extraordinary. You just never noticed because I didn't need saving." Nathan flinched. But he nodded. "You're right. I spent our entire marriage looking for people to rescue. I never saw that the person I should have been paying attention to was already whole. I'm glad you finally figured that out. I'm seeing someone, therapist, working through why I do this. Why I can't just love people without needing them to need me." He smiled sadly. "It's harder than surgery. Facing yourself. Most difficult things are." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 people who'd once promised forever, now strangers connected only by shared history. "I should go," Nathan said finally. I just wanted to see what you'd built. To understand what I missed. After he left, Elara stood alone in the memorial she'd created. The building that embodied everything she'd learned. Everything she'd become. She'd survived the collapse. The betrayal. The systematic attempts to destroy her. She'd won the competition. Built the memorial. Taken control of her mother's foundation. Proven herself on her own terms. She was no longer the woman who waited for rescue. She was the architect who demanded accountability. The daughter who honored her mother's legacy. The professional who refused to be diminished. She was Elara Vaughn. And she was exactly who she was meant to be. This is the story of a woman who refused to stay buried. Literally and figuratively. If this inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the best buildings aren't just made of steel and glass, they're made of truth. The memorial's first exhibition opened 2 weeks later. It featured documentation from the Horizon Galleria investigation, testimonials from the families of victims, and a comprehensive look at corporate accountability failures in construction. It also featured a small plaque near the entrance that read, "Designed by Elara Vaughn in memory of Catherine Vaughn, and dedicated to all those who refused to let truth be buried." Elara attended the opening but stayed in the background. Let the families have their moment. Let the survivors have their closure. Let the building do what it was meant to do. Bear witness. Her father found her near the end of the evening. Your mother would have loved this. Not just the building. Everything it represents. I wish I could have known her better. The woman she was beyond being my mother. You know her now. You've become her. Richard gestured at the memorial. This is exactly what she would have built. A structure that refuses to compromise. That demands the world live up to its stated values. That makes hypocrisy visible. I learned from both of you. Your discipline. Her courage. You surpassed both of us. Her father's voice was thick with emotion. I'm proud of you, Elara. More than I know how to express. It was the first time he'd said those words. Elara felt something break open in her chest. All the years of trying to earn his approval. All the times she'd felt invisible. All the ways she'd diminished herself to fit into spaces that were too small for her. Thank you, she whispered. That night, Elara stood in her apartment and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, the Transparency Memorial stood illuminated, its transparent walls glowing like a beacon. Promise that truth mattered. That accountability was possible. That 12 deaths wouldn't be forgotten. And here, in her quiet apartment, Elara Vaughn, architect, foundation director, daughter, ex-wife, survivor, finally allowed herself to feel complete. Not because someone had rescued her. Not because she'd proven herself to doubters. Not because she'd inherited money or won competitions or built monuments. But because she'd finally learned the truth that had taken a building collapse to reveal. She had never needed saving. She had only needed to stop waiting for permission to save herself. The Transparency Memorial stood as proof of that truth. A building that refused to hide. Just like the woman who'd designed it. And in a city full of structures built to conceal and impress and dominate, Elara Vaughn had created something different. Something honest. Something that would outlast all of them. A building that told the truth. Because its architect had finally learned how. He left her buried. She built an empire. That's the end of Elara's story. But it doesn't have to be the end of ours. Subscribe, share, and let us know. Would you have left like Elara did or stayed to fix what was broken? Drop your answer in the comments. See you in the next one.